Hey guys, welcome to Boxing Squared for boxing news and views from around the internet. The rising Uzbek prospect Bakhodir Jalolov has advanced to 10-0 following a fifth-round stoppage against the veteran journeyman Kamil Sokolowski. So this was a step-up fight for Jalolov, and we've got a few little clips from ringside of some of the action. We'll get to that in a moment. Solid performance by Jalolov. So what we're going to do is jump straight to the fifth round. And you can see here, so the camera work is missing the punch landing, but basically within a couple of seconds of the fifth round starting, Jalolov lands a straight left after a couple of pouring jabs, and Kamil Sokolowski backed up, stunned, and yeah, it was almost like it was in slow motion. And as he's about to sort of take a seat on the canvas, Jalolov comes over, and it looks like he does land a blow when Sokolowski is down. And he was reprimanded for that. But that was sort of a turning point in the fight. You could see that heading into this fifth round, Sokolowski starting to blow a bit heavier. He was getting broken down over the course of the first 4 rounds. He was starting to eat quite a few shots, dropped twice in the second round, although one of them was ruled in a slip. We'll come back to that. But following on from that knockdown, Jalolov just basically took his time in that fifth round over the course of the next minute and was picking off Sokolowski. And you can see here, this is the final sequence, lands a couple of shots. It really was sort of accumulation. Sokolowski, after that first knockdown, you knew it was going to be all over soon after. And he goes down a second time in the fifth round, and the referee waves it off. There is a brief protest by Kamil Sokolowski, but you couldn't really sort of argue too much. It was at this stage, he was just going to keep taking and shipping punishment. But it was a good, solid performance by Jalolov. He didn't really set the world on fire early. He took his time. He said ahead of this fight that he needed rounds, and I think this was the sort of fight that was going to give him those rounds, and he got it. So this was the deepest that he'd been in his pro career, 5 rounds, or almost 5 rounds, and it was overall a solid performance, which started with a relatively sedate sort of pace first round, feel-out round, but he stepped it up in round 2. Had Sokolowski down twice. The first knockdown, it was almost like a short left uppercut, more of a flash knockdown. Sokolowski off balance down. He still had his sort of faculties about him. And shortly afterwards, Sokolowski down again. A big body shot lands, but they were sort of part tangled up, and the referee adjudged it a slip. But you can see here from this little screenshot, Sokolowski grimace on his face. He was feeling the weight of these punches by Jalolov. There was a little bit of a mini sort of fight back from Sokolowski in round 3. Obviously, he was like, okay, well, I got to do something, get this guy's respect, try to keep him off me, because what Jalolov was managing to do really well with the height and the reach advantage was to manage the range. He was managing that distance well. He was coming in and out when he wanted to sort of try to get his work away, landing shots to some, sickening shots to the body of Sokolowski, which obviously Sokolowski didn't like. He was picking him off with that straight left, which he likes to use. That is his money punch. And Sokolowski was slowly being broken down and obviously ended in the fifth. So overall, it was a pretty solid performance. This was a step up for Bakhodir Jalolov, the opposition prior to this. So he's had 2 phases of his pro career. The first about half a dozen fights before he dropped back down to the amateurs and then went, for Olympic gold. That was a sort of 2-year hiatus effectively from the heavyweight division. Comes back, he had a sort of a soft couple of fights leading into this one, and obviously this was a test, a step up, and he certainly passed that test in my eyes. And I think for some people, they will view this as a bit of a statement by Jalolov. Remembering, Sokolowski is a good yardstick. He's fought a lot of good prospects. Not all of them are stopping him. And more recently, actually, there was a tune-out fight which Otto Wallin had against Kamil Sokolowski, and Wallin just didn't look that good. He was pretty flat, pedestrian in that one. Certainly, there was a lot more respect of Jalolov's power from Sokolowski than Sokolowski had for Wallin's. And overall, I just thought it was a better performance that Jalolov put in as compared to another southpaw in Otto Wallin, who just, it was pretty meh overall. But after the fight, there was some talk about, well, what about the what next for Bakhodir Jalolov? Remembering, he's promoted now by Probellum, just recently has signed that deal. He's also co-promoted by Lou DiBella. And there was the mention of, a name like Lucas Brown. That could be a possibility. I'm not sure actually that's one of those development fights at this point that's really going to do anything for him, because he'll knock out Lucas Brown in a round or two. Brown's durability is completely shot. But it is a possibility that fight could happen, because Jalolov co-promoted by Lou DiBella. If George Kambosos fights in Australia later this year, they might be able to get Jalolov onto the undercard. So it is a possibility it could happen. Another name which I think is a better name and a more appropriate test at this point, just because he can give Jalolov some rounds, is the Ukrainian Konstantin Doboshenko. He is a guy that is very durable, very hard to break down, and he's given a few guys like Vlad Tsarenko some very tough rounds. So at this point where you're desperate to get the rounds, the in-ring experience, go through a few things, test what you've been working on in the gym, that's a name that I don't mind, and you can get away with it at this point at 10-0. His profile is not through the roof at this point. The expectations of the broader sort of boxing fandom aren't begging that he has to be fighting, these higher level echelon fights. Although Jalolov in the post-fight interview said he is ready for the champions. He said he wants those big fights, but let's face it, that's sort of a statement that's not really going to come to fruition for any length of time, because at the moment, Jalolov is in the prospect phase. They've got to build him up, build the profile, build his experience, and run him through those levels. You're not just stepping from Sokolowski to a title fight. It's just not happening. It's probably at least a couple of years away, at least, until he is fighting for, major titles. And contender level fights, probably 2 years away at this point. They're just going to run him through those requisite steps that he needs to go through. But overall, I thought it was a decent performance, and Jalolov was happy with it as well. He said afterwards it was a serious fight, that it was good rounds. He was careful at points because he respected Sokolowski, and he was ready to face the champions, but as I said, unrealistic. And he was asked, and this was the second question in the post-fight interview, which I thought was kind of weird that they would just go straight into it. But after that first knockdown in the 5th round, and as I mentioned earlier, he followed up and at least in the broadcast angle, it was unclear if he landed on Sokolowski, but in the clip that I've played earlier, it did look like he did follow through and connect. And the second question was, why did you do that? Were you lucky not to get disqualified, or words to that effect? And he basically said, look, it was just in the moment I was doing it. I didn't mean to. It was, no sort of harm or ill intent meant. It was just, I was in the process. The referee hadn't called a stop to the action. So I guess it is one of these things. You're going to have to be careful going forward with those sort of situations. You're not going to get disqualified. But it did show me, or at least I sort of took from it, he's got that instinct to really go in for the kill. And I think that is important, because so often you see guys who are ready to take another punch and they will back out, and people will say, well, does that guy have the killer instinct? I mean, guys in the past have been criticized for not necessarily having that sort of dog and that mongrel within them. Joseph Parker, for example. But Jalolov was straight over there looking to wreck Kamil Sokolowski and waiting for the referee to break up the, or to call, hey, that is a knockdown. Anyway, I thought it was a decent performance. I think maybe he could have, looked to throw the jab with a little bit more authority at times. He was a little guilty of pouring it out, but overall used the ring well, used his height and reach to good effect. The left hand was money, and I think it's good rounds and good experience for the evolving Bakhodir Jalolov. What did you make of it all? Drop a comment, loud and often. Hit like, hit subscribe, follow me on Twitter, boxing_squared. I'm out.